Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at the newest expansion for Runebound 3rd Edition specifically, and that is Runebound Unspeakable Bonds. This is what goes for a big box expansion for Runebound. There were a couple of other small ones that just introduced a new scenario and some new characters. This one has new characters as well, but it also has a lot more to it. Specifically, and most notably, the ability to play the game either cooperatively or solo, with some changes. But there's also quite a few things in here that can just be integrated into any version of the game you choose to play. If you're not familiar with Runebound 3rd Edition, I do have a review if you want to watch that. Maybe I'll remember to put a link up there. But it's a 3rd edition of a game that's been around for quite some time and is primarily competitive, where you take an adventurer, go through this map of a section of the world of Terranoth, which is the same world as Descent and Rune Wars and Rune Age, which everyone forgets about. I think probably some other games I'm forgetting about. But it's primarily competitive, which was a bit strange, and I said as much as my original review, and I was hoping that much like with the original edition of Runebound, they would come out with an expansion that gives you some cooperative rules, so here it is. Did it work out? Let me go ahead and show you everything that's in this expansion, then we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think. Unbreakable Bonds is a large expansion for Runebound 3rd Edition. You'll need that particular edition of the base game in order to use this expansion. It includes a brand new rule set and components to play the game either solo or cooperatively, as well as several new elements that can be used in any game mode, including the original competitive mode. We'll start with stuff that can be used in any game, and that don't feature particularly new concepts. There are two brand new heroes for players to choose. Elium the Elf has a neat ability to spend an action and a gold to grab a social adventure while in a city. During combat, he can exert and remove 2 physical damage tokens to do 3 unblockable physical damage. Tatiana is a tribal warrior that gets 1 free hex of movement every turn if she starts in the wilderness. She can surge with her crackshot ability to deal physical damage based on her unspent physical tokens. There are 3 new sets of skill cards. The base game has 6 skill sets, which is the limit you can mix together to make the skill deck. So, you can have these 3 new ones instead, mixing and matching sets however you like, so long as you only have 6. There are new adventure cards of each of the 3 types, as well as story cards, all of them keyed into the new scenarios in this expansion, and including many new threats for the heroes. There are new asset cards as well, introducing a bevy of different items and goods to pick up on your adventures, along with their corresponding tokens. Now let's get to the new stuff, some of which can be used in any game, and some of which is only used for solo and cooperative play. Twists are a new type of asset card shuffled into the other assets. These are basically mini events that, when drawn, will affect whoever is currently shopping. Sometimes you get a reward for either providing a service or for doing nothing at all, but sometimes you have to perform a test just to avoid getting dicked over by the game. If playing in a cooperative game, you will shuffle the 10 new party skills into the skill deck. These function and are purchased just like other skills, but they potentially help every player, and consequently, everyone can help to pay the cost for learning the skill. The person who draws it doesn't even need to pay anything if they can't. Party skills just go in the common area for everyone to utilize when necessary. Speaking of helping each other in the cooperative mode, there are now 3 envelope cards. When in a city or town, a player can place either 1 gold, 1 skill from their hand, 1 quest, or 1 room or event on the envelope and hand it to another player. The next time that player is in a city or a town, they fully receive the envelope and can take the contents out of it, so to speak. Another brand new feature, but usable in any mode, is the concept of prepared actions. If you have nothing useful to do with 1 action on your turn, but envision a turn in the future when you'll need to take multiple actions quickly, you may instead prepare and save that action. Take a prepare token and place it on your hero sheet. On a future turn, you can spend that token as an additional action. This expansion also introduces the concept of variable enemy token sets. The brown enemy tokens from the base game are called the Warrior set. This expansion introduces the purple Mystic tokens, the red Savage tokens, and the green Trickster tokens. Enemies will indicate which set you're supposed to use. And speaking of that, in cooperative and solo modes, the enemies need to be controlled by AI rather than a competing player. That's where the combat boards come in. Each combat board is keyed to one of those enemy token types I just mentioned, including some unique abilities that initiate because of that. When you fight the enemy, you'll throw the tokens and place them on the board on the appropriate spots. Then, every time the enemy would have a turn, you'll resolve a token going from top to bottom. Surges and shields are the exceptions, as they are always spent immediately for the enemy when applicable in the best way possible. Finally, we come to the scenarios. The two scenarios from the base game, the Ascendance of Margoth and the Corpse King, get updated versions here that are more difficult and more fitting for the cooperative games. Margoth in particular must be defeated using the new concept of player parties, where multiple heroes will move together and assault enemies together. Two new scenarios are introduced in this expansion. The Locust Swarm is very difficult, tasking the players with spreading out and intercepting oncoming war bands of demons before they destroy the land. The Red Death scenario is very different thematically, instead tasking the players to find a cure for a plague before it wipes out all of society. If you own the small Caught in a Web expansion pack, you can also make use of that scenario's updated card, which now has you fighting the avatar of Ariad as well. That's pretty much everything for Unbreakable Bonds for Runebound 3rd Edition. Well, yeah, this is an easy one. This is pretty obvious. This is how, in my opinion, the game should have been right from the start. This essentially completes what I feel was already a good game, but definitely had some issues. And I talked about that in my original review. The length of the game, and also the fact that you just felt like you were this vagrant wanderer going about and doing your own thing completely separate from the other characters, even though you were competing against them. It just felt very odd. And yet I did like the game for all the other cool things that it had, the whole token system and just the flavor and the theming of the game and how you moved. I liked all that different types of stuff. It needed to be a little bit more. And although I was the only one that had even that high of an opinion, other people I played the game with were like, no, never again. But when I introduced these new cooperative rules, some of those same people were like, yeah, okay, that's how it's supposed to be. We're working together. It doesn't solve every issue that the game has, primarily the length of the game, but it does go a long way. When you feel like you're all working together, it goes a long way towards bridging that gap in quality, especially as I think I pointed this out in the original review. Even though we were supposed to be competing, we were still trying to help each other when it became very clear that one or a couple of other players were not going to be able to win. So they started helping the person who they thought could go and take out the big bad or complete the quest, whatever the case might be. So now that's actually been codified into an expansion that lets you do that. And there's a lot of other good stuff here too. Just to talk more about the cooperative, and the solo rules are basically the same kind of conversation, although there are some changes. Like, I like the envelope system specifically in the cooperative mode and the party aspect as well, where you can actually team up and be like a role-playing game party, which is what they were going for thematically. Now that actually works that way if you want it to. And for something like the new Margoth, the new dragon that you have to kill, the new version of that card, you have to do that essentially. The envelope system is very interesting, very neat thematically in the way that works out. And so, because again, you still do kind of feel to some degree like you're wandering out in the wilderness by yourself, but now you can actually communicate with the other players by giving them stuff, and I think that's a very cool idea. The game still works well solo, though, as well, even without those kind of bells and whistles, and the combat system stays the same no matter which way you choose to play, and I thought that was an interesting thing, too. They didn't keep it too complicated, but there is a rudimentary AI system there. Throw the tokens, put them on the board, activate them in order, always use shields, always use surges to the best, right off the bat, explore as much as possible, which is a smart thing to do anyways. But now you don't need to worry about having one of your fellow players throw the tokens and trying to kill you. No hard feelings. You're just letting the board do it. So that worked out well. And by the way, that's another important part too. Regardless of how you choose to play the game, having the extra sets of enemy tokens to give some diversity to the enemies and what they do is great. So that's an important difference as well. The new characters are interesting. I especially like the Wilderness Warrior Tatiana, I believe, or Tadia, who can get the free move every round. That's just a very cool thing. And even the other guy's interesting too. It has a really cool miniature, the dual wielding swords, because not even their combat abilities aren't even as interesting as their normal abilities. His ability to get social adventures just by basically having an information network in cities thematically is just a pretty cool thing. There's lots of new cards for all the existing decks, interesting enemies, adventure cards, assets. The new, I'm blanking on the name of them. The new like little event things that go into the asset deck. I wish that they'd spend a little more time on that, because some of them are like, all right, you get this cool little thing. Some of them are like, okay, you get this cool thing, but you need to make a pretty tough test. Some of them are, oh, make this test or else you get fucked. I'm like, all right, that's a little unbalanced. Maybe make them all have pluses and minuses, positives and negatives. I'm thinking of Eldritch Horde did a little bit of this a little bit better, I think. Make the test, you get this cool thing. Fail the test, you do take a penalty, but you still get some sort of reward. That type of thing. It almost felt like they just threw this in there as an add-on. And it's not game-breaking. I'll play with them. Whatever. Could have been a little bit better. The party skills, by the way, going back to the cooperative thing, great idea. Wanted to see more of those. And I hope that this is the whole idea of them even doing a cooperative mode is like the standard going forward. They'll have the competitive mode for people to play at any time, but I hope that every expansion, if there are more going forward, will have stuff for cooperative play or solo play. And chief among those for cooperative play, I hope, is more party skill cards, because that's a great idea. Everyone can contribute to get them. Once they're in play, you can all make use of them, and then deciding amongst each other. And I don't know how thematically you communicate telepathy, I guess, even if you're on different sides of the map. But I guess the way that you can decide which one's best to get right away, because you all have precious few trophy resources to use. I just think that's a great discussion to have, and again, it really shows that cooperative is the primary way to play this game as far as I'm concerned. And there's lots to talk about, but the scenarios are all pretty interesting too. I'm glad that they didn't just go with, here's giant monster again that you have to fight. Now you have the hordes of demons, which is, I don't know if it's supposed to be that way, but it was really tough for us with like the scorching the earth. Great thematically, really tough, and just we lost, but it was really interesting nevertheless. And then the thing with the Red Death, again, not just giant dragon coming towards city, they actually put some effort into how the theming of it works and how it works for you and the players actually having to do it, and the plague zones and things like that. All very interesting stuff, and it makes a game, it fleshes out the game. So I'm really a fan of Runebound. I think this makes it even way better, to the point where if I play it this way, I don't have to apologize for it at all for some of its shortcomings. And I hope that the game gets more expansions and more attention. That is Runebound 3rd Edition. They finally got it right from Fantasy Flight Games.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.